Okay, so we are starting up. Do let me know if you can see me, if you can hear me. Hey everyone. Can't see who's online, so please do say hello on a chat. That always helps. Do let me know if there's any difficulties. Again, if you can see me, if you can hear me, that's gonna validate and help me proceed into what we're gonna be busy today with. I see already Cosmos Beta giving a thumbs up. Gonna give another couple of minutes while people starting to get together and, you know, getting cozy. Hey Kevin, always good to see you. Always good to hear your thoughts in the chat as well as on a podcast. Let's see who else is here. Do ping a message. Hey Adriana, welcome back. Yoada or Yoada. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it well. Sorry for Stephanie as well. Okay, we have quite a few, so I think it's good to get started. I'm sure as people gonna join us, we can have, you know, a follow-up chat as per usual. Though, I mean, you know, I'm seeing a lot of people who participated here before, so you know the drill. Comment, contribute, challenge me, add your thoughts, because this is gonna be quite spicy, and in a way that, as always, I'm gonna use some material, because it's, you know, it's easy just to waffle for the sake of waffling, but it's much more easier to riff and build upon ideas so that we can create new and better ideas. And there's so many people now. I see Vahid, Brandon, Deepak, gaming and streaming, a lot of the people coming from all around the world. So anyway, so what are we gonna be busy today? And what I wanted to run this session for is this specific article. And it's an origin, right? Like, it's not like we're just gonna review the article, which obviously gonna be one part of it. We're also gonna nitpick and add our own thoughts. I'm gonna, you know, speak my own thoughts of like relevance, of severity, of how critical the thoughts are, like what substance and if there is any in the statements, what could we do better, what's broken, and how, most importantly, could we fix it. And this article packed it all. Like, it had a lot of the problem statements, and if you haven't seen this article, you know, take a look at it on your own leisure, but we're gonna run through it. It kind of covers a lot of those dysfunctions we had in design in a, you know, obviously a bit satirical note, or what I perceived as satirical note, with kind of reusing of a slogan. And I'm sure that some people are gonna get very kind of, you know, it's gonna rub some people off in the wrong way, but I kind of overlook it, because to me that usage of something, you know, and which something is obviously tended to inflame certain people or people around the world is it's obviously just to get eyeballs. So I'm gonna look past it. I'm gonna obviously use it in the title of a live stream, but I'm gonna look past it, because it's obviously a cheap point to just market an article. So let's see if the article is actually of a substance and if the actual points are actually valid. Because it, you know, as I was looking for it, I was like, okay, this is obviously, you know, it's meant to, I guess, get as many people on it and as many people viewing. And I only presume, because I don't know what the author Matt then had in mind, but I presume that it's, or I hope that he wanted to spark change and for people to kind of start talking. This is exactly what we're doing. So maybe he achieved his goals. But ultimately, the article states TLDR, digital product design, is reaching the midpoint of its lifespan and has become predictable, depressed, flabby, and suffering the inevitable crisis that I promise I'm not projecting. Okay, maybe a bit, but hear me out. So obviously this is addressing all those problems we've dealt and discussed in the past, right? Again, overlooking the memes, because memes are great, but, you know, so what? It doesn't really move us anywhere. It just kind of entertain us for a split moment, but that's about it. One thing which kind of interested me in this article was that it's divided into sprints, and I took it like, okay, this is almost like providing a mental roadmap or a model of sorts to split the improvements in a certain way, or at least to split and approach dysfunctions in a certain way. But the sprint zero, it's very interesting. And again, add your own thoughts as we go for it, because, you know, it's going to help me to riff a bit as well, or, you know, add a few notes here and there. Let me just jump to my Miro board because it's going to be easier. I'm going to remember where I left some mental notes for myself. So sprint zero, I love digital product design. It's my vocational happy home. The trouble now is that home used to be lovely, quaint, country cottage, but now it's terrace, 2-bedroom sub, cromulent shitbox on a newly built estate designed by committee to be built quickly, cheaply, project managed to the second, and totally devoid of any charm or personality. And I tend to agree a lot with this, by the way, because I think, as I was stating in so many videos before, like, a lot of designers fear to be automated out of their jobs, but they're still so connected and ingrained and almost like grown into tools like Figma and all those ecosystems, which are made really to replace them. Because if you zoom out, you realize that everything we did so far with the design operations, design systems, our libraries to be scalable, like all the different aspects of it, like we try to basically get ourselves out of the job so we save our time. But as a result, you end up with this mass, I guess this is what Offer is kind of saying, that you end up with this mass sameness, and why the buildings look so crap as you go. It's evident in architecture, just as per example. So any new build home is like this, let's say, at least in UK. I guess Europe as well, like, or maybe you could attest, let's say downtown or metropolitan areas in any other country are really optimized with materials, with structural blueprints, the actual engineering side of, you know, from everything from the nittiest of grittiest details up to the actual facades. They meant to be easily assembled, they meant to be budget friendly, they meant to kind of restrict and de-risk everything. And that's exactly how products are made in digital too. Like, there is no surprise, right? Like, we optimize until there is very little to optimize, and we kind of run out of those optimization bits because we end up with the sameness. This is a big pain point. Like, I felt it in the past too, and I'm also guilty, and probably everyone, each of you is guilty too, because as a designer, as a UXer, it doesn't even matter what your trade or specialty is. You're always being put between a rock and a hard place with these things, because you need to make people happy, your users happy, or stakeholders happy, yourself happy, but you also have some creativity or some flair where you want to innovate, you want to do something different, you want to make your mark in the world. So balancing act, right? Like, but I think, as per Offer's notes, we kind of steered away and we ended up in that sameness, or that vast ways of working, culture, nature of how we do things. It's no longer like an option to say, I'm going to do something different, because in that case, you need to create your own business. You cannot be part of a business which has established design system or materials or ideas or concepts or just generally everything ultimately, because there is so many knocks on it. And I'm sure you would agree to some extent, at least. I see comments immediately from artisan to industrial. Yeah, that's definitely a good summary. The irony is that people cry about sameness and not accepting unique ideas by manager or anyone. Yeah, it's true as well. I mean, this is what I think this whole article is going to be about, because there's nothing sadder than a person complaining who's actually doing it, right? Like, it's, you know, or nothing more ironic than someone who is, I don't know, like doing some bad deed and then saying, we should, you know, why are we doing this? So maybe that's where, but again, like, we need to take a personal responsibility. It's not just about the offer. I think it's just stating the symptom, if anything. And that is how I feel about modern digital product design. Everything looks the same, bland, boring. Definitely. I think we kind of went for it. But interestingly, templated frameworks is called out, which to me is something where, let me just, I know that you can't really see my cursor, which would be much more fun to go for this. So you know exactly where roughly I'm looking at. Right. Let me just pick the right color. So roughly stating this, the templated framework, I think this is also one of the things, because the more you want to optimize design, product design, the more tools, the more processes, the more ability to work within constraints you come up with. I know a lot of designers who love to create frameworks, myself included. I used to thrive on creating simplest templates, designing workshops, things of that nature. But that also then contributes to the sameness. Like we basically create our own mistakes ultimately. The houses in a comment, the houses in the we have in the US are called, I guess, cookie cutter home. Yeah, I think it's everywhere. I'm sure people from Asia or other regions would agree with that too. As usual, I will attempt to research the problem and provide a satirical solution. The usual caveats apply. If you are easily offended or work in HR, then please click here. Don't need to click, by the way. If you haven't seen this article, it takes you to the Rickroll, the Rick Astley's "Never Give." What's the song? Gonna give you up. Whatever. Just to troll everyone. But let's go into the actual meat of the things. So sprint 1 is design recruitment, and all of this, by the way, again, the article is divided into sprints. I thought it would be, I guess. Or I want it to be, maybe that's a better expression. I wanted it to be cumulative so that it grows. It's almost like there is a start there, and there is a stagger of activities you could do. But I don't think there is any, because it seems like it's like issues across the board for product designers, where product designers are facing some things, and that's what's kind of dysfunctional. So design recruitment is one, and I tend to agree a lot with this. Design recruitment agencies are struggling as they need to turn tedious briefs into strong candidates. I respect that. I regret previously opening on that the design recruitment industry needs a reset, or that the design industry is crying for a new recruitment model, or that currently design recruitment is a dumpster fire. So this is a lot, but also nothing to me, because it's very, very surface level statements. I think some of the things which kind of is worth looking into it is these things, and these are very tiny issues. These are like symptoms of a problem to me. For example, the actual briefs, including these jazzy words, or what's going on with okay, am I able? Yeah, I'm able now. Like Figma Wizard, Pixel Perfect, Design Ninja, things of that nature. I've seen those in the past. I don't think I used it myself, because it always was a bit cringe to me as a hiring manager back in the day, or when I kind of create different briefs. But I think there is a lot of that, and it's not just a surface level statement from a sense that it obviously stems from something. That's how designers tend to be positioned, and I think we're going to come back to that. But all these statements, and I think unicorn would be another one, which you see down below, basically are defining of, okay, if you're going to join us, you're going to do it all, or you're going to be expected to design, research, ideate, do stakeholder management. You basically are going to be expected to be a jack of all trades, which I think that's where the people are coming from. And it has been heavy. The UX industry and design briefs have been like that in recent months even. That you have more IC roles, but also more principal level roles or senior level roles, which are expected to do it all, and to do it at a very proficient level, which then forces out all the managers or the head offs, all the design leaders, and also juniors out of a picture, because only people who are in this mid-range, who are capable to do their own work, but not necessarily grow design capabilities or mature them, kind of succeed. And Kevin is saying, sprints in this article are themes, not necessarily linear, but interconnected. But it is mimetic, sorry, as it borrows language we know in the product world. Yeah, I think it's riffing a lot on memes and just general satire. That's how I take it, at least. But there is a lot of stuff where you can't really tell even if it's a satire or if it's serious, but that's even better, because then you can actually discuss of like what is what. So bad briefs, unicorn theory, less money. And I think this has been the biggest issue right now. I think product management, and I don't think, by the way, this is a fact, product management and general tech engineering and deep tech engineering in AI are much more fortunate right now because of all the buzz with generative AI and model-based technologies ultimately. There is little AI to it, or like what I would call AI. I guess, we could debate in it, but ultimately the shorter end of a stick is what designers receive because it's so tech centric. There is less money to invest into the actual design capabilities and maturing design. So I tend to agree with that. I think the only thing which might be foreign to a lot of people is that I think Matt, the author of this article, is coming from someone who I guess worked a lot with agencies and has been, I guess, I'm probably not going to be using the right word, but kind of like a mercenary of sorts, where maybe joining a lot of clients or working with a lot of external clients and then solutionizing or working with them to shape it. Because that seems to be like when you call agencies and things of that nature, all those different variables then shift. It's not the same as someone who would be, let's say, in-house. However, it's still applicable. Too many micro recruitment companies, which is very general as well, and social media too. But too many recruitment companies is, I think, what author is calling out, that there is literally, I guess, and what happened with the big tech layoffs and those 80,000 or so jobs in tech being laid off at a minimum, because that's just self-reported data, but let's say 80,000. A big chunk of that was recruiters. If you've seen my live stream of UX industry and trends, I talk deeply about recruiters being a big signal of things being very bad or getting better. So if you see recruiters being hired, internal in particular, or recruitment agencies engaging, you can know that there's going to be more demand for actual people who are going to do every other job. So that's the good part. The bad part is that the layoffs happened. A lot of those recruiters lost their jobs. A lot of agencies shut down. And whoever stuck around, whoever didn't go into other industries, now created their own recruitment agencies. However, I feel like this is just a symptom. I feel like it's a small side of things, and I don't know if it's even worth calling out in this sprint for product design. I think maybe it's a pain from someone who was looking for jobs and couldn't find it because recruiters were just, like trying to survive themselves ultimately. That's how I read it. And then social media, the worst thing to happen for humans ever. Again, this is big one. I mean, it's calling out a lot of the designers who flood and spam LinkedIn, Instagram, any other channel, myself included. I'm producing this content and I'm guilty of it, but I guess, I'm part of obviously that, but writing articles is exactly the same thing, especially if you want to vent or call something out. Again, it depends like how heavy you are on it, how surface level the content is, things of that nature. But I think what specifically the author states, which I certainly agree a lot, is that social media skewed and affected what the portfolio is, or what good portfolio for designers are. Because recruiters who, again, are, recruitment is probably one of the hardest jobs out there. It might not seem like that, but, the results, so much uncertainty and so many variables which are out of your control play there so much, because they rely on everyone else but themselves to create that momentum for them to be successful. And a lot of the recruiters in the past, I've seen some on LinkedIn who ran their podcast interviewing design leaders. They basically went above and beyond trying to establish themselves as design thought leader without being designers, or maybe we did some design and they established themselves as design leaders. So I tend to agree with this as an issue in a way. as long as, again, it depends where, to what extent, what's the context is. But there are cases where certain recruiters would give advice to designers of what their portfolio should look like, how much in depth there is. And obviously what offer is stating that you have to have, and I'm paraphrasing, obviously, you have to have enough skin in the game to give someone advice that, hey, your portfolio should be improved. Like if you're a senior, you should kind of take with a big grain of salt the advice you get from a junior, but not to like the massive extent where it's totally different, or like where you obviously reject it immediately. But the same applies for, let's say, if you're a senior but you're asking for advice from a manager, because the thoughts, the connection with the actual work is different too. Even if that person might have been where you are, they can give you perspective, but that's about it. Like they don't know who you're going to be interviewing with or what industry you're going to kind of go into. So you always need to be choosy of the feedback. I think the pain point here, and this whiny bit a bit, is that if you apply for a job and a recruiter is stating, hey, your portfolio sucks because you need to show more process or thinking, then it's kind of like you are stuck, because they are your agent. They are your connector point with companies and those opportunities. So you kind of give up. And that's, I think, what happened with a lot of these examples of what I could read between the lines, that recruiters then influence a lot of those portfolios, or how candidates present themselves, and maybe become even more same. Portfolio itself became a meme, serving little to the designer, but rather than to the idea of what the designer should be doing. Yeah, and I think this is, I kind of overreach, but I think even in the article itself, the author is stating, the portfolio tells a story, and if that person is not right for the job, that's fine. Don't make them change their whole thing to get a job they were destined to get. I very much agree with that. But with that comes a big price you might pay, because you then need to be okay that you're going to be rejected from a lot of jobs. I could give you an example. When I was applying for jobs just a year ago, most of the job applications I got rejected, even if I have a lot of experience, even if I have so many case studies, probably too many even if I tailored my applications, I got rejected because, again, you need to understand you need to know what sort of role and what sort of hiring manager and what sort of team and what sort of company would need your type of skill sets, because not every company is going to need it. And not every company is going to find what you say or what you show in a good light. And you should be okay with that. And that's not just from the offer itself. I'm sure every single senior or every single experienced person is going to say yes. It's just that it's a very hard pill to swallow and a very big pill to swallow. It's painful, but that's the truth. It's like, it doesn't matter how senior you get or how much experience you are, your resume, your portfolio could fall. But the more you do it, the more you understand, okay, these type of companies is where my portfolio performs best or my work performs best, and therefore you kind of go into it. So I think that's where someone telling you, take this cookie cutter template for a portfolio, which a lot of the boot camps might be recommending to use, or the senior use somewhere else, is definitely not going to work for you. And I've seen that in the past, where I would be reviewing these portfolios in the States, specifically. Well, I could give you a few examples, but one is in Silicon Valley, which is super tech heavy and product design heavy. And I also viewed some from the actual, I guess, Midwest would be the right term, where it was much more UX heavy. And I could tell that the person who was based in India, for example, or even in Europe, if they would use that same approach, they wouldn't get that same job they want or they desire. And that's because of the differences in terms of everything from the process, from UCD maturity to the actual case studies of how you solutionize or how you present. It could be more visual, or it could be more research heavy, or it could be X, Y, and Z. And as such, the best thing to do, and this is pulling away from the article, maybe advice or a tip is consider what your region is. And if that recruiter who's going to give you that advice is based in that region, or that senior who's going to give you advice is based in that region, because a good UX portfolio is not global. A good UX portfolio is your portfolio. There is no such thing as a perfect portfolio, which I so strongly agree with this, Matt, with author of this, that it almost doesn't matter what anyone thinks, as long as you were successful and as long as you can tell a story and you show what your work is. Because it's like any other portfolio. You basically are saying, this is what I did and this is what I want to be doing continuously. If you don't like it, or you don't think that work is what you want, then there is no match. It's kind of like being okay with that. Because if you're going to try to do it all, you're going to end up with these portfolios which don't resonate with anyone, and it falls on its face, falls flat, because it's bland, it doesn't tell a story, it probably is looking like AI generated it. And I've seen so many portfolios like that, in particular from people who come from courses or boot camps. And this is not about, pushing crap on them or basically talking garbage about it, but it's like if you start with a template, you're going to end up with a very templated approach. You kind of need to start with yourself and telling a story you experience, and then projecting of like who would actually resonate with that, and being okay when someone rejects you, because rejection is going to be a keyword for anyone, especially as we go into AI and automation and everything in between. Like, we're going to need to be okay to be rejected from 9 jobs out of 10. That's the nature of it. I'm putting it blunt. I'm tired of how much you are reached on LinkedIn offering to improve a portfolio and charging for it, of course. This is interesting. I never gotten that, but maybe I'm not part of that audience. Adriana, can you write more? Like, are you actually getting like messages on LinkedIn which state, hey, I could improve your portfolio for X amount? Because that's where I would be as well suspicious. Because if that person is not based or gotten that job in even that company specifically, it's like, should you listen to that advice? Maybe just listen to it from a heuristics perspective. Kind of like a UX project, when if you would just go and UX something without user research and you just apply, I don't know, Jacob Nielsen's heuristics or UX factors or some usability principles, you're going to end up with something which is sort of good, but not necessarily like 99% successful from UX perspective. So you need to optimize. That's where the perspective comes in. Me even talking and giving you advice on this live stream is the same way. Don't take it as a gospel. I'm not Jesus. So it's not like, this is perspective. It's half-baked. It's just one of the signals which you can take away and be like, oh, he has no idea what he's talking about, but it gives me some like ideas of what I could improve on, or maybe it gives me ideas of what it should be to challenge that. So it's kind of like ideation principles of having so many different inputs, or so many, kind of like an inbox full of different ideas, and I'm giving you just one idea out of many, and then you collide them and you combine them and come up with something even better, basically. Yes, all the time, companies and recruiters. Yeah, that's odd one. That's where I would be looking, kind of like, yeah, I think the UX industry is also broken because a lot of people, and I don't know if it's called out in this article, but a lot of the people also make a business out of the most mundane things. And I think on my podcast with Hank Su, if you haven't seen it, it's a terrific chat we had in, I think, December. And it was about UX industry, portfolios, things of that nature. And granted, Hank is based in New York, if I remember correctly. So it's US perspective, but he was very, I guess, specific of saying that we want to productize everything in UX and want to make a living from meta and peripheral activities rather than design. And that's where I think there is a lot of that. where people, when they see a problem, which any other designer has about portfolios, they think, oh, how can I make a buck out of it? And we're not guilty of it, and I'm not saying it's a wrong approach, but I'm saying there's a lot of that, and you then need to be very choosy of whose advice are you going to ask. And I think the best advice you're going to receive is free advice, if you ask me, because this is, you know, it's not a business accelerator program, or it's not YC Combinator where you're publishing your startup. This is just tools you use to get a job, and it's as small as that. There's nothing bigger than that. You know, nobody's gonna give you rocket fuel to accelerate your career with an advice. Like, it's ridiculous. So, you know, I got my, you know, this is sidebar, but the best advice I gotten from people was not advice I even asked for. It was something which lasered in my mind because it was such a hard lesson, or it would be a mentor who we wouldn't even agree again that we're mentor and mentee, and they would tell me that, hey, maybe you should do this, because they are so genuinely wanted to help me. But you can always tell if there's that. If you ask someone's, you know, portfolio review, it's just going to be a review. It's just a surface level thing. Okay, let's move on, because I think I went on a tangent and covered quite a few things. So portfolio, I think this is a big one. It's like, who do you listen to and what portfolio is good? There is no good portfolios. There's no even bad portfolios. It's just not portfolios which are gonna get you job A specifically, that job, not the next job or the other job. It's like, again, you need to know where your portfolio is going to work, where it doesn't. And everybody does. You know it. I bet you know it. Like, I've seen so many portfolios, even from my friends in design, people I even manage. I'm like, okay, you could get this type of job. In my head, of course, I might not always say it to them, but I know exactly what type of job they could get. And that's where the match happens, basically. I don't kind of try to say, your perfect portfolio would be this if you do that, because it doesn't exist. I would literally shoot them in the foot. I would literally, you know, put a spanner in the works basically for them. I would delay or stunt their opportunities. So this is something I'm very, very careful about when giving advice. Okay. I know there's a lot in this, but Sprint 2, design ops. So I worked for some big corporations, and those with large design ops teams are struggling with design part. They're amazing at the ops part. In fact, we are 95 ops and 5% design. Why? So this is a big one, and I sort of agree, but I also disagree, because for any design capability, any company to have design operations as a function, as established roles and capability, means that they all optimize so much, and they optimize like to such an extent that everything is very predictable, de-risks, and that's the whole point of design ops, is basically you add it when you have too much to manage, or too many things which need to be standardized, or you know, from everything from procurement process, funding process, from tools perspective, well-being perspective. When you have so many designers or researchers, you need to take care of them. So I disagree with this sentiment. The statement is fine, because only big corps are going to have design ops anyways, or to the extent which is described here, but it's a necessary thing. Because being part of that, as I know not everybody has been in companies where you have hundreds of designers. If you've been in big tech, it's thousands of them. Like, imagine managing these big of capabilities, because they need processes, they need established standards. You can't have the same company running amok and different design teams behaving differently, because you end up with unmanageable mess and accountabilities drop, and ultimately, then you don't have any design leadership. You don't have anyone at the table. And that's why design ops are so critical to it. I think where it's coming from, maybe it's from that sameness sentiment from before, that when you kind of cookie cutter. But again, I'm very challenging of this point. I'm challenging this point very much so, because If you ended up at design operations and you have a design operations established, it's like you are years ahead from the design systems and sameness. It's like you already have established design systems, teams, designers, and engineers for design systems, and everything in between the implementation and design conceptualization is all tied up together. Basically, it's like everything is already made to be the same. This is like almost like a separate issue altogether, if it is an issue already. And there is only a few companies which do that. There's a lot of corporations out there, but not every corporation has it centralized or centralized as a partnership, where you have design ops as a partnership across the board, as a horizontal slice across different business domains and different design teams. So I would discard this. I would take it as a satirical take. Design ops is now so I cut this off. Let me see where, just so I don't lose it. Okay, so why? Product. Design ops is how product see design. It's not how design sees product. Let's make everything work around product. Let's make systems and processes and make everything work like a good, solid product team. This is in theory, sounds great. Streamline the process to create less process. Again, I see how this makes sense, but in reality, good design does not work like product. It's hardly even agile. It's messy and unstable. It's not set of tasks. It's sometimes organic and always emotional. Product design nowadays is 95% product, 5% design. You can see where the issue lies now. So it's the same way, basically. It's kind of like making a parallel between design ops and product, which, again, I don't agree. I feel like it's also applicable and maybe accentuated and severity is increased on bigger corporations and bigger organizations. Take any bank. Let's say I'm going to talk from UK perspective, but let's take one of the big banks, one of the global names, which has design ops, hundreds or thousands of designers. This applies a lot. And I think the actual offer comes from that, because they state, I worked for some big corporations. So they probably worked in fintech or somewhere similar to that, where design maturity is high enough to have the mass of designers, to have centralized partnerships and guilds of sorts. But, it doesn't mean it's applicable to all. I just see that, okay, yeah, there's a theme that, you optimize, you ended up with sameness. But if you choose organization which is smaller, the severity of it is also smaller. It's not a linear scaling by any means. Okay, sprint free, which is next one, and I think this is a big one, is Figma. And before even I jumped into this, my own thoughts about Figma is that obsession with Figma has been untold. I don't think even if Adobe or Macromedia before that tools, if you're older enough, you remember the Macromedia Flash and all the other apps which got acquired by Adobe. Then it became a Adobe Creative Suite. I don't think even Adobe used to be as big of a deal or king, or at least there wasn't such a cult with obsession of a tool. It was an essential tool which everybody used, but nobody were jumping up and down, or I'm maybe as I say, I'm a bit wrong on this, but I perceive it as it wasn't such a big cult or reliance on the tool itself. As a designer back in the day when I started UX, I used Photoshop or Fireworks back in the day, or Flash, to design UIs, literally drawing blocks with no constraints and no variables, nothing to it, on a free canvas. And you had to figure out the grids, and that's when the grids actually mattered back in the day. Now it's, you could argue, but there wasn't no constraints or sameness or something which would keep the constraints in place. And even then you were closer to being an artist than you are now. And I know design is nothing like art, and I've hammered this message, but as such, there wasn't such obsession with tools. There wasn't this cargo cult of people who they could basically they could basically sacrifice their future jobs because the tool is so good right now. And that's what's happening with Figma, if you ask me. And there is a good stuff with Figma because I know that Figma's vision is a bit different than what Offer describes. But, you know, let me just leave it there. I don't want to go on a tangent, which is actually gonna, you know, inflame anyone. Not that I am too afraid to do so. But sprint-free Figma. Figma is an excellent tool. Sorry, for making rectangles. Very much agreed. But it's become way too much like a design project management tool. Collaboration is not about being in each other's working files. How are you supposed to design anything considered when there are multiple non-design people making and so this is tactical. This is so, you know, I would even kind of say, don't invite them. You know, it's you as a designer set how you want to work, and you set the cadence, you set the methods, the ceremonies, the principles. You know, you have to do that. Granted, it could be set for you by design ops. So, you know, maybe Matt has something here. And dev mode too, as a simple handoff, was not collaborative enough. And I think with this, I need to call this out because a lot of people overlook of what Figma is trying to achieve. I mentioned in so many live streams and videos of the issues with abstraction levels where designers design already in code, because everything you design, even if you draw a rectangle, it has dimensions, it has code behind it. Then someone else recreates the code to make it look like what you made in code already, even if you don't think that it's in code, even if you do it visually. So there is a big chasm between one layer and another layer, between abstractions, and jumping from one to the other. As such, very inefficient, boils the blood of design ops, boils the blood of product, boils a blood of actual designers too, because we spend so many hours and they get burnt out because of different issues, by the way. But anyhow, without going into those issues, the tools therefore become very cumbersome. And what Figma, I think, is doing, or I hope is going to do, we're trying to bring the development and design together into one tool. And I haven't seen their vision for a future because everything is very meek and very disappointing. All the things what Figma delivers, or vision types, is still not long-term enough for me. It's still like a year or two in advance. I saw the last vision types from Figma before we wanted, or as we wanted to be acquired by Adobe. There was a lot of buzz of like them doing workshops and sharing some stuff. It was very high level, conceptual, but even then it wasn't long enough. Because if Dylan would by some surprising chance watch this live stream, or, you know, I might make a clip and send it to him. If he would watch this, then I would ask him to, why don't you think bigger? Why don't you think what design and development collaboration is going to look like in a decade? And then start with that, because the abstraction layers would have to meet, and it wouldn't be, again, designing something visually but still in code under the lines, and then someone else recreating code to design it visually. It's almost like translation effort which is missing. And I think that's what, you know, I hope maybe we have it in the back of their minds and we are not sharing, so that it's more of a competitive advantage. But that's where any tool would have to get, or any big product leader would have to think about. Anyways, the big thing which is called out here is, again, another symptom, which is, let's say, product people being incentivized to learn Figma, which I think is good, but it's also like, you know, you can work with Figma out of the box. You don't need a course. So it's, I guess it's a symptom, right? I'm not taking it as a kind of like a factual issue, which Offer is like, oh, look at this. It's like, it's breaking the world. It's not at all. Design, it does not happen alone, but it also doesn't happen in a crowded room, which I sort of agree, but also disagree. The old saying, too many cooks spoil the broth, is appropriate here. So this is, if you ask an old school UXer or UX generalist, which I think the Offer calls out as one of the issues, they would tell you that design does happen in a crowded room. And it happens from a lot of minds, and that UX is everyone's responsibility. And I'm in that camp. I think that participatory design is important, but it has to be guided. The designer has to be facilitating. They have to be empowered to do so. They have to be positioned to do so. And it's also designer's responsibility to start with that. But if all your work is being done in Figma and you work in isolation, and then there is a product manager who's remotely kind of chipping in and adding comments, I have no idea who's going to stay sane with that, because it's like such a big adoption. There's so much to adapt ultimately. Your mind, your skills, your methods, everything in between. You kind of need to stay sane with that work, like, approach. I know 99% of the time that's what the work is, but you can do more. You basically need to zoom out. You need to become experienced designer instead of interface designer, ultimately. That's all it is. And the more you interface design within Figma, the more you establish and the more you reinforce those methods of someone just coming in and leaving a comment, or product manager just adding something which doesn't make sense. And then it's like this frustration loops of, okay, let's now call it work, but in reality it's not work, it's just coping with shitty situation. I see a lot of people remember Macromedia tools, ActionScript. ActionScript was the real deal. ActionScript 3 was my go-to as well for animations and things of that nature. Figma got attention for its collaboration and is now exploring ways to expand their incorporating coding, but it's still in the early stages, making it not yet ready and challenging. You see, I agree with that, but I think collaboration was a start. That was 7 years ago. That vision is already achieved in a way. Like, it has to basically, that collaboration now has to be redefined, and it has to be almost collaboration 2.0. That's where that new vision is. And I'm not saying, I'm not challenging you. I'm just building upon, because I think Figma has to do a bit more to kind of look way ahead, project, instead of looking, okay, what can we do next year? So Adobe doesn't overtake us with some sort of random tool or some other tool, or Sketch maybe wakes up or something along those lines, which unlikely to happen. They're focusing on AI, and I think that, Praveen, that I think is refers on Figma, right? I don't think that is focusing on AI is BS in a way, because they're like focusing on technology type is not really, again, good UX, or is not experience driven. It's not human centered. That's just, like me focusing on, I don't know, like some sort of voice interfaces or things of that nature. It's like it would be so isolative that I would go that way as a tool. Anyways, without going to the rabbit holes, imagine if I jumped into GitHub and refactor someone's code or arrange the product backlog, I would get fired. Nah, but depends who you ask. They wouldn't get fired. You should have a good relationship with a product manager to do that, or to challenge them, or say, hey, you should probably adopt. So that's where it's like, it depends where designer and how they are positioned, how big of a leader they are, how much of a thought leader they are, how influential they are. So I would challenge that a lot. Other than leaving some comments on design, I'd say is simply way too intimate to expect to be moving my rectangles around. So it's kind of calling that, hey, I'm doing rectangle work, but you shouldn't touch it because I'm don't touch my Legos, basically. So, satirical take at that, but there's also like a harsh truth, because every humorous take has some sort of truth in it. Also, there are 10 ways to make stuff now and make it properly. It's more about how you're making the Figma than what you're actually creating. The value has shifted from design to a design production. Maybe something is getting lost in the process. This, I strongly agree. I think this is something which we should quote out, because we mistake craft for, I don't even know what, but basically we got hooked of how we cook the sausage instead of how the sausage is gonna taste for our users, because nobody cares how you cook the sausage. Your product manager shouldn't care how you cook a sausage. We know that you cook it by hand. That's all that matters. You don't have to do tours. Your users don't care how you cook the sausage. It's Some users will. They're gonna go once a year on a trip to see how the sausage is made in a sausage factory because it's a tourist attraction. But those are like 1 in a million person, like 1 in 1,000, let's say, roughly, right? Random numbers. But those are so rare that it's like you cannot even make it significant or important. And that's what I think I agree strongly with Matt here. The whole overall design industry, if we take from UCD approach, has been obsessing about how we do design instead of what the actual outcomes are or outputs are. But we forgot that, you know, design is not just within these Lego box and you play with your Legos and you come up with some new structure or some new figurine or things of that nature. It also matters of like who's gonna play with it in the end, because that's what that's the most important part. Nothing really else matters. On the abstraction part, who start from a high level concept with simple forms and shapes to get general direction and a more in Figma world? I do, and it often needs to start outside of Figma. It's way too easy to go directly to dev. Figma is an intermediary layer, and a very porous one. Yeah, I agree. Like, it's a canvas. It's where you put your ideas and you make something. But again, it's what fragments our industry a lot. And Figma is just a tool, but it's a good one, and it's guilty of that. You know, it's so good that people just lost their minds in a way. And this is a top highlight. Remember, the user does not care how good you are. So yeah, so that's exactly about that sausage, basically. Nobody cares about design system. Nobody cares about, you know, people care about results. Oh, and I love that they actually made sausages got made. It's exactly my point. You know, so that's where I guess agreement is. It's not code. If code is bad, the user notices as the service is slow and buggy. But there is also a lot of influences. So here, where it's saying that, you know, design is not code, design is code. Because if you design and, you know, you don't project what's going to happen in code, then it's a poor design. Because you need to design for implementation. You need to play with engineers to understand what's possible and things of that nature. As an extension of that, design is code. And also, if you take, again, simplest example of you doing something in Figma, Figma is coded thing, and the rectangle positionings, the constraints, the variables, everything is coded behind the scenes. The only thing what I think Figma should implement is showing maybe a meta layer or ability to dig down by abstraction levels and seeing for designers to see exactly what that means. Dev mode kind of does it, but it does as if it's a palette for a developer to pick up and still recreate it. But the actual creation process could be represented visually in code for designers, so they know, okay, if I add this block means this in code, in this object for, let's say, whatever programming language you're gonna mean. There could be some of that. Cool. Right, let's take a short break. I'm gonna take a sip. I think there is some good stuff in this article for sure. You know, I'm not trying to kind of beat, you know, I'm not trying to throw rocks at it. I think there is a lot of self-inflicted limitations here. There is a lot of, I guess, projection, as the author stated before. I think there is some of that, you know, you can't avoid it. But again, it's just a factual thing. Sprint 4, generalist versus specialist. And this is where a lot of, if I remember now that I look at it again, a lot of that conflict can come into, because when you talk about design, you need to basically be specific of what sort of design. Because if I come from my biases from UX background or UX generalist background, it's going to be very different than someone who's, let's say, a creative director. And there is a lot of riff of jack of all trades, but master of none. The actual quote states that, you know, it's better to be, you know, a master of one in the end. So everybody knows this, basically. It's a bit of a cliched kind of example, but the author is stating it was supposed to be a compliment, and for a lot of designers, it is. I don't need a researcher to be a Figma ninja or wireframe hero. They are designed to be a master of one. UX designer, well, it's great if they know some layout and color theory, a bit of testing, great secondary desk research, yes, please. Our industry needs to ask itself, is product designer enough? And that's, I think, is a big question as well. Because just like with design, product design means a lot of things to a lot of people. When I had my previous live stream on how the roles might shape up within design, someone called out in the comments, and it doesn't really matter who, because it was just an example of what people think, but it was saying, you have no idea what product designer is, because product design is like product manager for design. And it's like, yeah, but so what? It's, you know, like we can romanticize or we can frame the roles as we want them to be, but it's still going to live within our heads, and it's still going to be this venting mechanism and culture of us defining product design as a role, and nobody else is going to see it like it is or like you want it to see. If you ask a product manager what product designer does, they're obviously going to have some ideas, but they're going to give you this, like, you know, top of their head take that probably is going to be about outputs of a design. If you ask someone else, take business stakeholder, even more detached from reality and so forth. So it kind of scales. But we also need to basically realize of what product designer is, because just 7-10 years ago, product designer was a title which was used in physical industrial product design or industrial design, design engineering, which was for hardware, for physical touch points. A lot of the product designers there are still are sour that digital designers took on that title. And why? I have no idea. Like, that always puzzled me. I think product designer as a title has always been limiting and self-limiting at that, because you position yourself as a product manager's assistant to design things. And I know we want to be equal partners and we want to do equal job or be equally respected. But if you just say product designer, it makes you an assistant, or someone is just another flavor of product manager, because you're not a manager, you're just a designer. But also it kind of disqualifies you from all other flavors of it, like service design, UX design, research, things of that nature. And granted, a lot of the companies are still gonna require product designers to design with all the different flavors and tools and things of that nature, but you are gonna need to be responsible to pick the right tool, the right method, the right nature, because nobody else cares what you do. But if you just call yourself that, then who does the rest? Or if you just do this, digital product design, who does the rest? So again, there's a lot of thoughts here and a lot of takes here, but I think it's very self-limiting. I think my podcast with Debbie Levitt was touching on that a lot. And there, Debbie, I think, described product designer. I think a lot of, back in the day, a lot of UX generalists took on product design, and a lot of UI designers took on product design. It's basically that role has been pulled apart in so many ways that it doesn't really favor anyone anymore. So, you know, go figure. Part of the issue is the scale of organization as well. These titles exist across huge scale for small shops, startups to enterprises, and then across industry. Yeah, I tend to agree a lot. It depends. Like, I've been in organizations where UX role or UX designer role was only allocated for senior UXers, leads, and so forth, and leaders. And when everyone who was junior was called product designer. But that was a bias that product designers were doing UI design or digital design, and everyone who's more senior was doing more strategic work, customer experience, service design, things of that nature. That's one way to split it. Other organizations are going to be different. In other organizations, product designers are going to do it all, but maybe not customer experience, but maybe not user research, but maybe not this. So there's a lot of it's very context dependent. So it's also, we need to be very careful if it's fair to compare it. But I think where the actual offer comes from is that product designer is not UX designer, and that UX designer probably is living between user research and product design. or somewhere else. I don't know. Product designer exists because it is an easier sell than the idea of the ideal UX designer. Plus allows differentiation between other flavors of digital design. Yeah, but it's still, but let's zoom out for a sec. Like everyone, like, you know how pointless this is. Like this exercise of kind of like, let's figure out what we call ourselves. Words do matter, language does matter a lot, but it's wasting so much energy and time of like defining of like who are we, or what do we call this, or why do we call what we call. It's like it doesn't really even matter in a way. I think where we shoot ourselves in the foot is that we call the things which mean very different things to everyone. Or, you know, it depends where, again, you are, your region, your industry, your company. That's where, to me, is like the biggest issue. And I think that's why when I read this article, when it came to those roles, I'm like even trying to almost think in different mindsets and different hats, kind of like, do we mean this? Do we mean that? Are we from this environment? Are we from that? Are we located there? It's just like, are we actually talking about the same things? And I know a lot of design leaders default to just design, as I just said, design leaders, right? So I kind of made a blanket statement. But then that even doesn't give it justice because it disqualifies research, you know, which then gonna inflame some people too. It's just, yeah, it's a lot of those things. So yeah, let me go a bit forward because I don't think we're gonna get somewhere. I think one of the things which definitely threw me off is that I guess the positioning of the actual UX designer, that it's a generalist who, and again, it could be tied to the experience of a person. Like if the only UX designer you worked with was someone who just did wireframes and did a bit of shady research or crappy research, then this would be a definition of it. But me, it's much more than that. And I don't want to romanticize it or inflate it or make it more important than it is. But it's, you know, it's who you experience with. Here is a lot of stuff which I'm gonna skip because it's you know, it's talking about builders, cabinet makers, and things of analogies which could get lost. Part of the issue now is that anybody can be a product designer. I agree. It's become a catch-all term for anyone who can do some wireframes, create some journeys, throw in a persona or two, and bosh. Half the time, the person is a something else autodidact who did a boot camp, and that's cool if you have design chops, but the rest of us are trying to survive in the field of cheap labor and bad rectangles. Yeah, I have nothing to add. Get some proper UX people. So this is a call out. And no, doing some wireframes is not UX, it's just drawing gray rectangles. Well, this is where I think the next points are so important. I don't want to even read it, but again, coming back to an example, when I had Cal Thompson, VP of UX at Headspace on my podcast, do listen, it's a very important episode, especially talking about roles. Cal basically described their perfect scenario of what a good UX team would look like, or what a good UX capability would look like. And it was exactly what I have in mind too, or what I experienced from 15 years ago or so, you know, like even longer than that, what I observed back in the day. But there always has been someone who does the UI, someone who's a craftsman at that, and someone who's more akin to product designer today, who's basically a virtuoso working with the latest, the trendiest, the most innovative ways to present information to the user and make it interactive. And there always has been someone who has a different way to operate, or slightly different way to operate, who's basically very strategically minded, but also like basically a digital psychologist. Someone who can observe and translate the user needs and basically tie in with the UI designer and shape that solution together. And as such, UX designer do gray wireframes is okay, but UI designer also does the gray wireframes until they are okay to basically update it. And obviously gray wireframes is not fair anymore because nobody does it. Design systems are way too advanced. So even those UX designers who can't visually design now use design systems, and the output is very similar or exactly the same, because nobody again cares about those houses which look Tudor style versus the blocks and office buildings we are so obsessed right now. So this kind of working relationship and those two minds has always been the way. I think what happened with the product design, again, don't want to go to that dead horse and beat it more. PD was a mix of the two plus some product strategy thinking, the GTM, and so forth. Let me just add that so it's not confusing. And that's about it. But still, the need for those two persists. It's just that, the different amount of it is. I think a lot of a PD is taken by a UI, like a lot of a UI is taken by a product designer, a lot of a UX is now shared with a product manager. So different roles are taking it on. However, I think even the offer here is agreeing that, you have to put more money on UI or visual design person, plus you have to have someone who's, generalist, but also kind of like if people would specialize, it would be much easier to control it. But costs, budgets, things of that nature come into it, so it becomes even more complicated. Again, depends where. Context matters. Context is king, and I think without it, it's just waffling basically and stating examples which might not resonate with everyone. So it's the combination of your title and portfolio to show who you are and what you are looking for. I think it's even less about the title. Quite frankly, Adriana, even like to give you a tip, let's say, the more senior you would get, let's imagine like a speculative example. So I know that you are doing some development. I know that you are passionate about UX. That's about it, right? So you have those two things. Let's say you are in a company, Acme Limited, and you practice design, you practice web development or front end, whatever it is, right? Whatever it's called. You do this work for 2 years. Your title could be web designer, web developer, front end engineer, something like that for front end experiences. You can change that title when you apply for some job. And you can say, I was front-end developer, but I specialized in UX or something. Or you could even say, I was doing UX, even if your title was front-end developer. Like nobody's going to sue you if you basically state what it is. That's what design leaders do, or that's what leaders do generally in business, because it's what you do instead of what your title is called. So as such, you can rename things. If you are a founder and you have a company, you have a startup, and you're the only employee, and you did it all, but you product managed as well, developed and research and stuff like that, and you want to apply for a marketing role, guess what? You could go with a founder, but you could also say, hey, I was in this company, which I started, and I was a marketing chief. Simple. So like the titles are very flexible. They have to come from what you're doing actually in a job, and then you can use it. That's what counts as experience. That's what not many people do, and it's shameful because they think, oh, I just joined this company and I'm gonna do UI design because it's on paper. So what? It's like you can rewrite it. Like let's say this example I brought up before, I was a UX manager. I started as a design lead, but I led a capability of chapters of designers. And that design role became manager role, but it actually was a head of role because it was 20 plus people across different chapters, massive design portfolio and things of that nature. Responsibilities was a head of. Therefore, I can state that I was heading up that, or at the minimum, I was a senior design leader managing these massive capabilities. Because the role, which is on HR systems of which you hired, doesn't mean that it restricts you from doing those things and practicing those skills. As such, you can position yourself in a better light or in more proximate light to what you want to achieve. Same applies to portfolio. It doesn't matter what you put on a portfolio. It's almost like the less you put, the less specific you are, probably is the better. Your work should speak, because what you put on your portfolio is the work you want to do continuously or in the next role. Without going too much, I don't know, there's a lot more here. My title, user-centered interaction designer and AI explorer, LOL. Fine, you know, go with it, embrace it, be confident, basically. Don't flatter, basically, on that. Means are just means, tools are just tools, processes are just processes. Your value is in how you can put them together to achieve things, how you interpret the situation, how you made sense, etc. I agree. I definitely agree with that. Nice. All right, let's go to the next one, because there's a lot, and I'm jumping as well. You know, I'm not doing justice here reviewing this article because there's so much more in it. Do read it up. You know, do leave a comment for author. Again, some things are great, some things I'm challenging, some things I'm building upon, but that's exactly why we're doing this. Sprint 5, design systems, and this is a big one. I recently applied for some work at a fintech, and as a lead product designer, I would join a team of 10 humans solely working on maintaining the design system. Yeah, that's how it is. Excuse me. That's how it is in big companies, especially established ones. And like every other one, it was built on atomic design principles. Yep. And itself based around a 10 years analogy over 10 years ago and had cool name. Yep. Since then, did the company need to hire 10 people to run a pattern library and XYZ? Where is the design part? Is this design ops? Yes, it is. It's part of it. It's a big part of that. Design systems belongs in the design ops. And as such, the small capabilities who have design systems or grow design systems inevitably make their own design ops capability, because someone has to manage now. If you look at jobs, the other day I saw a job which literally stated product manager for design systems. Design systems is a product. It's an internal platform product in any other firm. It's just that it might not be that mature or established enough. So it's design ops, but also it's a product of their own. It needs manager. It needs its own rituals, ceremonies, things of that nature. Yeah, but it's again, it's riffing on those symptoms that we are the cause of it, obviously, but we are basically made it as efficient as we could. And an example of that is design team of one, where a person joins a company and there is no design system. There is maybe a brand guidelines. It's very rare now, but it is. The first thing what so many designers do, especially product designers focused on visual design, they start creating palettes, they start to create these design libraries, things of that nature. It's almost like immediately people jump right now to create design systems. They're very basic, but still, they give it a go. So just because of that inclination, that you are immediately jumping and creating your materials and putting them, in all these different spots, like here, so I can take it and put it on a freaking canvas easier and more efficiently and more effectively. That's also part of a design to me. It's almost like comes with design, because it's that hammer carrying person analogy, that, if that's all you have, if that's all you have to offer and that's how you operate, you're going to keep creating design systems again and again and again. And most designers do that. So that's fact. That's about it. And of course it's BS. There is a lot of dysfunctions with that. We are basically ourselves, again, from a future perspective, gonna get, automate ourselves out of the jobs, because we're gonna have so much semi-structured and unstructured data in those design systems and libraries that someone just can put a good model in and they can automate you out of the job, which happens already in graphic design. I just posted a video the other day on Design Squad community where a graphic designer lost their job, and they basically ran through this audio track here in UK. I think the only designer, and they're creating marketing things and, you know, doing figma stuff ultimately, not necessarily for product or digital stuff, but even an email campaign is a product. A brochure is a product. Everything is a product ultimately, as long as there is a customer or someone who uses it. So the more they did it, the more they realized that they have less to do. And by the end of it, and I'm paraphrasing a lot, they kind of had nothing to do. They got laid off. They sniffed around. They figured out that all those designs they're producing, all those components, and working with the client brand, variables, for lack of a better term, their headlines, their colors, their margins, every other detail was used to train the AI to produce it quickly. So the business owner just had no other, no other basically choice but to say goodbye to that designer. And I'm not saying it's wrong or bad, but that's just the nature of it. That's the reality. That's a fact. That's the actual experience. And, product design, UI design is not that far off from that. Again, I'm not going to kind of go through all this spiel that you must become more strategic and broaden your skills, but it's already happening. It's already like a good example of the things to come, especially if your work is producing design systems and churning, because by the end of it, there is so much churned and so much produced, so much material that you really just need an accident, a person who's smart enough and who's a bit of a psycho, one of the Silicon Valley folk who create all the generative AI tools, who just wants to be like, oh, it's cool, let's make it happen. Again, not saying it's bad or wrong, it's just what happens. Person who just says, I could make a business out of that if I would just automate design system production. Done. It's simple as that. Someone just need to put the money in, the effort, the energy, the hours, and the rest is history. And, it's just a matter of time to... Design systems are great, and like AI, a natural questioning of their purpose and value does not equal a misunderstanding. But to me, they exist to further make design more like product and engineering. Both are task-based and rely heavily on frameworked processes and methods, and they don't really require design skills. Yes, because again, design systems is a product. It's a product designers make themselves. It's a product designers invented themselves. If we take something like Brad Frost from Atomic Design Systems Principles, which started a lot of this, he was a designer developer. Blame him. I'm obviously joking, but he made it a product. He created a recipe of how to productize it. Simple. There are the people that are actually doing the design. Most companies are releasing digital products and focus on how they made it. Yeah, it's coming back to that. And ultimately, we are going to reach the point where design systems teams are going to become bigger and bigger. And I experienced design systems teams which had 5 designers, just like Matt did here, the author of the article. But I see it growing not more than that. It almost doesn't matter how big the corporate is or like how big is the organization. At some point, you're going to reach the ceiling. The law of diminishing returns is going to kick in, and the numbers are simply going to drop because it's going to become inefficient, again, for the sake of optimization. As such, we're also going to reach that point where more and more design system automation is going to happen, and these teams are going to wean off. They're going to become smaller and smaller again. So it's like a bell curve with likely very sharp drop at some point. It's going to change. It's inevitable. My point is that it's just that it's going to be one of the AI products instead of someone maintaining it. Cool. Let me just take a break, see what you actually add up. Do let me know your thoughts, by the way. I know I'm sharing mine, but it's interesting to hear what you have to say as well. Having too many layers, bureaucracy slows things down and affects the outcome. Logistics. That's right. Design is becoming engineering in a way. It has always been. I mean, you never were far off from it. Digital design language is general aesthetics, but that I don't mean only visual, but its relationship between form, function, content, value, etc. has been conformed, coded to the system it serves, and the system do not care about the designer. Yeah, it's factual. It's also like it's being able to be self-aware and recognize that you are part of a system, that you are creating the system, that you are one of the things which could change, and you could make a drastic decision to change it from whatever angle, or you could participate and continue doing so. But that's how we got here from years. It didn't take us just a few you know ideas here and there. Brad Frost atomic design principles, which I was laughing about, it's just one of the pivotal points, but it's not necessarily what caused it all. Those designers or design leaders who create courses on design systems right now, again, creating pivotal points or branches in this multiverse of design system and automation and design, but they're also quite responsible for the future generations. And then something else is going to come in, and something else is going to come, and design system as a system is going to evolve and change, but it's still a system. It's in the name. Cool. Sprint 6. Let's go back to the basics. And this is where, like, I kind of, I feel like it's good. It's good to talk about the nitpicky things, especially when it comes from like designer perspective. But icons, for example, calling out that icons are not great, that Nokia back in the day had their own icon designer whose sole job was to do icons. I know, but this is such a rare instance. And also icons, I see a lot of people on Twitter having said that, who create custom icons and they post it daily, but it seems like it's self-directed. It's for the sake of a craft. It's a practice run. Like, no companies anymore are investing so much effort into it. There are still designers who are a bit more generalist than just icon designers creating it. And here's Bumble one, which is saying that it's awful. I'm not gonna even put into it. It's very subjective. Obviously, they could be better. And then going into things like celebrating diversity of the roles. I think it's good. I think this, here's to the crazy ones, the famous quote from Steve Jobs, is something which a lot of design leaders used. I used it in the past too. Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules. You can't quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them, but the only thing you can do is ignore them because they change. You can't, ignore them because they change things. They push human race forward, and while some may see them as crazy ones, we see genius. Because the ones who are crazy enough to think that they can change the world are the ones who do. Powerful. And I think it's also reflects of how many product managers view, or how most of the business stakeholders out there view designers, because we are the troublemakers, and you can't escape it. It's almost like that's the definition of design, is to challenge a bit and push it forward, because you are the one who's considering so many different angles, and you are the one who's basically trying to evolve whatever it is to work for someone. So there is form, there is function, there's other considerations, as highlighted in the chat by Kevin, I think. But it's like, that's the role of designer is to be a challenger. Like, you can't escape it. It doesn't matter what you do or to what extent you do. I think it's trained, I think it's learned, I think it's something which people develop over time. Some become total digheads and very hard to work. Others become someone who actually make the meaningful change and evolve companies to go ahead. So it's also that, but I think it's just factual. We can celebrate the diversity of roles, but ultimately the designers, as a designer, it's not that diverse from that perspective, because they're just the ones, again, crazy ones, misfits, rebels. They are the ones who basically try to push the boundaries and often sacrifice the feel good or like the status quo or kind of go beyond it because they want to enhance things. A cross-functional design team needs to be few different skills and knowledge. This is what I certainly agree. I feel like the best teams I managed and the best teams I've been part of have all a lot of people with strengths and weaknesses, and they shown in different challenges. They were basically supportive of each other. It's almost like a stepping on each other's shoulders because one is a giant in a certain scenario and the other isn't. So I certainly agree. I think one of the things what offer calls out is how I hire my design rock stars. LinkedIn articles being one of the issues, but I don't necessarily, see it that way. I think I agree to an extent that if it's not useful or people just churn it to create a personal brand, sure, but it also is a learning material for someone else. And you could argue, does it really break the diversity of roles there? Like how I hire my design rock stars doesn't mean that it's not reflective of those skill sets or diversity or different flavors of design a person could do. Great stream, a lot of learning. Great to hear. It's a great article, by the way. I mean, you could agree, you could disagree, you can learn from it, but I appreciate the comment. Take some risks. But wait, where are we? Are we in the... Okay, this is a call to action for everyone, by the way, because I lost the track. Because these sprints, again, to me, it's unnaturally laid out. So, I'm trying to position it in my head. But another, I guess, call to action is to take some risks. I agree, but I wouldn't even tie it to A/B testing or A/B testing. What offer calls out is like, oh, you don't need to A/B test color variants or things of that nature. I totally agree. Like, to me, the risks have to be beyond the patterns or beyond the specific button usage. Those are like such a small risks, which you can learn from so freaking fast, especially with design systems. They have to be risks internally, managing, influencing stakeholders, the business counterparts, and so forth. It's like working with other people. That's where risks are, because you're risking your own, your own position, maybe your own livelihood, your own well-being. Sometimes, you're risking a lot on that regard. Like, rarely do you risk much from UX perspective, from business side, because if you do UX from user-centric perspective, there is so many methods, tools. Again, it's gonna make it much more same, but that's where that de-risking comes, and your job is to de-risk a lot of the things, right? Really put the user first. I do agree, but I don't think it's the issue of the designers themselves, or not the UX designers who do UX or who already realize this. I think this is maybe a call to action for designers and product people who are maybe, they operate in a knee-jerk way. They have too many reactive work. They kind of go and see if it sticks instead of learning. So like, the learning to me is more important here than putting a principle statement that you should put, the user first. Like, everybody knows that, they just don't know how. And to me, to put it how is to obsess about learning about the users, not about just stating or making a statement. Users matter. Yes, they do. Everybody agrees. Everybody. I don't know, my parents would agree with it. Your parents would agree with it. A person on the street would agree with it, but they're not even involved in making it. Everybody agrees what matters. It's just that, like, how is missing. And to me, learning, it would be the better way. And L here is not like, an L, giving an L for it. It's just learning. Stand up for design. The best product owners want you to challenge them. Agreed. Big one. They want smart, creative people in a room. Sort of. And they need your help getting insights out of users and customers. Agreed. They need you to be great at this. That's subjective. Design is not making a tidy Figma or doing Miro or even making pattern library. This is very aspirational, but I do agree. It's understanding the problem to solve. It's taking risks and making great products. Very aspirational. So, great. And that's where we're almost arriving at that end. You can kind of feel it, exactly the sentiment of what the person is saying. But there is a few bits here. I just feel like it's still not specific enough or not actionable enough of how to fix it. We started with so many problems and then we ended up with these principle level statements, but they're still, to me, a bit detached from what actually is required. But maybe it comes again from how we position the roles, what UX is, what it isn't. But what does the chat say? Design has been sold as de-risking your business for the past 20 years, whereas it used to be opposite. Let's try something and see what happens. I would challenge that, Kevin. I would say it's a bit the opposite to me. I think let's try something and see what happens has always been the case. And also designers kind of adapted that. It's like a lot of the designers kind of give up fighting against it or trying to de-risk it or trying to produce value or quantify it or measure it. I think maybe that's where it comes into those like contextual elements of like, where is it happening? The de-risking part, I think that's why the product manager role came to be. I think because designers weren't really doing that much, someone had to do it, and therefore, product management kind of came to be with a lot of the UX responsibilities and de-risking. Like someone had to be that. And I think, again, it's years of incremental change and design leaders giving up on a lot of that influence to me. And again, depends where, region, companies, that's definitely going to vary. Doing it with method, though, is important and is what design is about. Yeah, I agree. It's kind of comes down to this. I think I had a video on what stunts creativity. I think it was 7 problems or 7 ideas. But there was a study in Cambridge or Oxford University of how can teams be more creative, basically. And I'm butchering the title of the thing, but it was a research and a lot of empirical evidence overlapped, basically, from actual creative people and creative teams who are labeled as creative not just by themselves but others. And a lot of the data was stating that creativity comes from constraints and that creativity needs methods and standards. We need you as a UX designer, for example, in a room to say, we need to go through these workshop steps, through these specific activities where we're gonna diverge and converge and come up with something and capture those themes and go from A to Z. It needs that. Like, creativity needs process. It doesn't need immediate ideation and jumping to solution like that, but it needs guidance. It needs to have some sort of rough lines in the sand where you would kind of go through something. It needs guidance ultimately. It doesn't need to be, you don't need to be told what to do, but you need to be guided and led through like an approach which would make sense from like human-centered approach. And I'm butchering it, but that was one of the things. And in that comes in that way, you have to collaborate. You have to ask a lot of questions. You have to use the minds of your team to come up with something better together. And that's where creativity lives. Again, Google for that study. It shouldn't be hard to find, but it's something like, what makes teams creative and what doesn't, study or research or something like that. And you would find really good insights in there. And mind-opening too, because it reaffirms some of the notions I had in mind of like, okay, am I creative or am I stunting it? To what extent am I creating? Like from a spectrum of Steve Jobs, maybe not a good example, but Steve Jobs and someone who's like an accountant. Obviously a joke, accountants are creative, but between the two, like where should I be in this specific scenario or in this problem? And that kind of opens the mind, because it doesn't matter where you are as long as you have the tools and you have involvement from the team and you have a trust and you come together and riff and push each other's boundaries and push the solution and work on the actual, user needs ultimately. Okay, retrospective. Right, let's finish this off on a big note and hopefully positive. I don't remember what it was because I took a glance at this article by the way, so I didn't really read into it too deep. But let's look at what we worked and what we didn't. Sorry, what worked and what didn't work. What worked, I got all of this out of my chest. What didn't work, my relationship with recruiters needs a design sprint. Okay, so it's humorous. Next step, making product design great again means falling back in love with design. Again, making time for exploration, craft, and finesse. Less time in meetings, less time in Jira, more conversations on design. So with that, I only agree with the last bit because I think people need to talk and start talking loud and very soon. Focus on craft and finesse is going to isolate design even further, where design is going to become passive. It's going to be active on its own, but passive from the terms of product or business or how it's positioned. So let's say if this is your team and you're a designer in a corner working with your Legos, and sometimes you visit other people and you're part of this bigger organization, well, then you have all the issues which were described in this article, all the dysfunctions. However, if you're a designer who has Legos here in the middle, and you also go out to talk to other people across a business, and you also build trust and you have influence across a business, and you come back to influence those Legos, that's how you design things which actually work, and that's how you influence of how design is done, and that's how you make design ops not a block factory or not a forklift warehouse where you just push different pallets of different goods in different orders and you assemble new orders to be shipped out. Less time in meetings, less time in Jira. Never gonna change, unfortunately. We can fight it like in every design leadership role. Too many meetings has been coming up as one of the big issues, and always try to improve it, always improve to an extent. But meetings is a deeply personal time management subject, and it's deeply personal. It's less about team, it's less about design craft, it's less about design community and how we do design. It's like you as a designer have to put boundaries if you don't want, and like if you want better meetings or if you want less of them or if you want more effective meetings again, you have to make that call and you need to lead. You need to tell off people. You need to say, this is how we can do better because I need to design or I need to do research. And that's what worked in teams I managed before, or myself as an IC back in the day, is where you have to define what good looks like and you operate from that level. And in some organizations, that's not going to work and you're going to need to adapt your ways, obviously, and that's going to be your go-to thing. But in others, it will. In others, you might just not have productive anything, and then you're going to need to find some other organization where it's going to be productive. But that's about it. And about Jira, I'm not even going to talk about it. It's the same way. It's just a tool. It's just like Figma. If tomorrow Figma goes bankrupt, goes to administration, I'm going to go back to Sketch. I'm going to maybe use Miro to wireframe things, or maybe, again, who cares? We're going to have more tools, other tools going to pop up. There's more tools which are indie, which need attention. But that's about it. But what are your thoughts? What do you think about the article? Because we went through a lot of themes, a lot of scribbles. I see Kevin stated probably that's to do with creativity. Well, it's the whole promise of ideas design thinking. De-risking your business is how design has been sold to many business people. Yeah, but yeah, I agree with you, and I don't think it was it, and it isn't it either, because design thinking, it probably was marketed at that, but it isn't that at all. It's more about designing things for human and empathize for better or worse, or for in better ways or worse ways, because it's not kind of perfect. I'm sure you would agree. Cool. Right. I hope you enjoyed this stream. Again, it's yet another stream. I'm gonna make this slightly more regular, maybe every few weeks. If you do have any other topics, or if you have articles or pieces of content to look at, I have a few ideas already. So if you don't, fine, I'm gonna crack on. But if you do, I'm massively appreciative, because it makes it more back and forth, easier for me to kind of reflect. It's always easier to kind of do these things from something, instead of just tuning in and hearing crickets. But I really appreciate your participation, your comments, your contribution. I hope you enjoyed this live stream. Have an awesome weekend, and look forward to the next live stream. Thank you so much.